I was doing a shamanic journey. It was in October, and it was just connecting with the energies of the full moon. And all of a sudden, I hear in my head telepathic voice, and they said, "We've come to help humanity." And they told me how they work with different worlds. This isn't the only planet. We're not the only beings they work with, but they're like on a mission to support civilizations that are on the verge of becoming starfaring people, starfaring beings, like start to leave their planets, explore other planets, other stars, eventually creating other home worlds. But they've told me that there are, I don't know who they are exactly. I haven't asked, but they said and they're watching us. So it's a collective.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today we have Brenda Seldin with us. She is a channeler, an energy healer. She's also an experiencer, and she's been experiencing communication with what she calls the travelers. So we're going to talk to her about that and all the things she does. Thank you so much, Brenda. I'm really excited to have a conversation with you tonight. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Anybody that's been used to The Soul Inspired, I generally start each episode very similar. And I look at who you are now, and I'm sure you lived a life filled with apparently experiences, and we're going to talk about that. But I look back further than that. I go back to little Brenda when you were small, when you were young. And if you have changed over the years, usually I'm trying to look at when you first started having experiences, but we can go before that if it happened. But I try to get a little bit about who you were as a child and if you had any similar characteristics back then.
Well, actually, as a child, I'm a daughter of immigrants, first generation.
Hmm.
So I know we're going to speak about my ongoing experiences with beings, interdimensional beings who call themselves the travelers. So in a way, it's interesting because being an immigrant is like being an outsider. So then when you start to connect with extraterrestrials on a regular basis, there's this interesting path in my life of an outsider, but being okay with it.
Hmm. Absolutely. And so were you communicating even as a young child the with
No,
them, or was it later on? Okay, so you didn't have communication with them. Did you at all have any indications that there was anything different about your life experience at that time, or were you living kind of the normal childhood? I understand
yeah,
you had immigrated, but I just didn't know if you had kind of like normal childhood.
normal. Oh my, so interestingly enough, the travelers were waiting for me to reach a certain level of spiritual development where they could connect with me. So I know you haven't mentioned it yet, but
Mhm.
so I do the Akashic record. I work with the Akashic records. And when they first telepathically communicated with me in 2013, they told me they were waiting for me to do that because the Akashic records are very high vibration and they're very high vibration. So in order for them to connect with me, they were waiting for me to reach that level. And that happened in 2013.
Okay, so they started communicating in 2013. So
Hmm.
we obviously jumped over a lot of your lifespan to
Yeah.
get to that point, but I would assume then, and sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, then if you were dealing with the Akashic records, you were working in energy work at some point in your life, getting into, we could call it spirituality. The
Hmm.
names out there can get all thrown into different things, but you were
Yeah.
obviously going in that direction to get into the Akashic records. Am I correct?
Yeah. My life started out. So the interesting thing living in our culture is that when you're in the school system and you go to the guidance counselor, there isn't an option for, are you an intuitive? Are you
Right.
interested in the spiritual path? So, of course, first I went to all these different paths, archaeology, international politics. I just wasn't finding anything that called to me. And then I just started a master's in Columbia University. I was so miserable. I was
Hmm.
procrastinating so much. I went to a hypnotist And they asked me, well, what do you want me to suggest to you when I hypnotize you? And I said to him, suggest to me that I'll do all my academic papers without procrastinating in a calm manner because I was anxious and just miserable.
Mm.
So I can feel myself like sinking under. And I heard him give me the suggestion. And there was my inner voice saying, no, I won't. You can't make me.
Mm.
When I came out, I'm like, the master's is over. So I quit. I quit
Wow.
Columbia University. It was less than a year. And I started to volunteer at two wildlife rehabilitation centers. I didn't get to grow up having pets, but I always had a passion for animals. And I became a wildlife rehabilitator in New York City. I did that in the 90s. And that's when the gifts that I were born with were starting to come out. So, for instance, I would have dreams or I would receive communication, what my animal patients needed, how they needed to be helped. So I worked a lot with homeopathy with the wildlife.
And that's where when I was reading the things that
Yeah.
you do, that's where the animal communication came into. That's where it
Well, when
started
my
from.
center had to close because the space changed ownership, and it's not easy to rent a place in New York City when you're not independently wealthy and do wildlife. So
Right,
that
right.
was, I feel like, grace from God. Yeah.
Mm.
And that's when I did workshops. My teacher was Anita Curtis. And from working with the wildlife for so many years, it just came naturally. And that's when I began as an animal communicator. But by that time, I had also worked with a teacher and was I had a shamanic practice, doing shamanic journeying. And many years later, I would work with clients with healing, with land blessings. So one thing always led to another. And eventually, I moved to upstate New York from New York City because I've always said I grew up surrounded by 8 million people, but I just wanted to be surrounded by 8 million trees. So finally got there. That's where I still am at. It's a very small town in the Catskills. And I had a property where I could commune not just with the animals, but also with the land spirits.
Oh.
And just even there, I remember once I'm walking on my land and I saw what now I know is a mountain lion. And it was like 40 feet in front of me, sitting up and just not quite looking at me. And even sitting up, it was humongous. Me being a city girl, it's like, did a lion escape from the zoo and I didn't hear about it?
Right, right. Yeah,
So I'm just standing there. And I
yeah,
remember a friend said, did you try to communicate? And I'm like, I was trying not to go in my pants. I thought
yeah.
this could be the last day on earth. And a
Mhm.
few minutes later, just the lion got up and just ambled away. And less than 2 years later, the spirit of lion became one of my principal animal spirit guides.
Wow.
So just very special. I really appreciate the spirit world, the connection, like during COVID.
Mm.
By that time, I was a widow, lived up here by myself. And honestly, just going outside and being able to connect with the land, with the trees, I just never felt alone. And that's one of the things that I appreciate and try to share and teach other people to reconnect with everything.
And you said that
Mhm.
in 2013 is when the
It
communications
began.
began. So
Hmm.
let's go. This is amazing. I just wanted to go back to that time
Yes.
because at that time, again, that was obviously before COVID and all that. So you you were doing work, shamanic work. You were working in Akashic Records at this time with
Yes.
individuals, and you had clients and people that you would work with.
Yes.
Okay. And maybe bring us to the point of how this started with the communication with what you're calling the travelers. Maybe we can dig into that a little bit and
Sure.
just see how we moved into that.
So I was doing a shamanic journey. It was in October and it was just connecting with the energies of the full moon. And all of a sudden I hear in my head telepathic voice saying they were actually, I should tell you the truth. They call themselves the Voyagers, and for some reason, I'm like, no, let's call you the Travelers. It just shifted, so I
Ah,
renamed them. So
okay.
anyway, yeah. So they're the Travelers since then. They've never complained about that. And I heard a voice, and they said, "We're the Voyagers, and we've come to help humanity." And they told me how they work with different worlds. This isn't the only planet. We're not the only beings they work with, but they're like on a mission to support civilizations that are on the verge of becoming starfaring people, starfaring beings, like start to leave their planets, explore other planets, other stars, eventually creating other home worlds.
Mm.
And as you know, I don't know what was happening exactly 2013, but since then, this is this is the beginning of that. And so I'm used to hearing voices. I communicate with animals, they speak to me. Um, in shamanic work, I can hear people's guides. So that wasn't unusual, but I knew this was different because extraterrestrial beings, they're real. They're different from us, but it's not an angel, it's not a sweet dog or cat.
Mm.
So at first I was like, okay, it was just a voice. I was like, okay. But then, so what I tell people is just because a spirit connects with you, you have to make sure it's a good spirit. You can't just, that's why the Ouija boards, you can't just open the door and it's
Oh yeah.
like, whoever wants to come in, I'm here.
Right.
So, of course, I didn't know who they were. And I'm like, well, I'm going to have to get to know you and ask you questions. And before that, I never, like, I was interested. I would think to myself when I was younger, like from the movie E.T., oh, wouldn't it be nice just to see something and go, could it be maybe?
Mm.
I never expected this.
Hmm.
So they really wanted me at the beginning to start channeling their messages. And apart from not knowing them, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do that, just regularly. And that's when a few months later, for like almost 2 years, I had nonstop experiences with flyovers of like all kinds of different UAPs. It was their
Wow.
way of like, you know, their way of like nudging me. They never
Hmm.
did anything. When I didn't know them then, yes, I was very nervous. For instance, in the little town where I lived, I would walk my dogs at night. Very, very tiny town, under 500 people. And when I walk them at night, everybody's in their home. Out in the countryside, most people just let their dogs out in their yard, but I would walk my dogs.
Hmm.
And I would see what I thought was a small airplane going right over the rooftops, like right over the roofs. But all I could see were red and white lights and the way they were spaced out. And at that time, since I didn't know them and wasn't used to that at all, the mind tries to fit in the experience into what it knows, especially if it's scary and very unknown.
Hmm.
And it would always happen as I was walking down the street, either get going on it, because I lived on a dead end street, getting off of it. It would make a rumbling sound and it would go right over the rooftops. And I was just like, why doesn't anybody else hear it? Why isn't anybody else coming out? And then, like years later, I realized I never saw the metal. All I saw were the lights. So I don't know if it was one ship or just orbs in formation,
Hmm.
but it happened over and over again. Or for instance, I would see I remember once this very bright, it was like a big starburst type orb. And it was like almost to the top of like a pine tree, very high up, but it was slowly coming towards me. And at that time, I didn't know anything about it. I said, is this a drone? I didn't even know how big a light of a drone could be. So I'm trying to look around this way, that way, seeing more of it. All I could see is that. When it was almost over me, I looked down at my dogs. How were they reacting? I was very nervous. I looked down, I looked up, it was gone. And
Wow.
it would happen just all these things over and over. So one of the photographs that I sent you is the very last photograph that comes before the video at the end. It looks like, well, you'll have to look at it, but it's the closest picture to another experience. So where I live, It's a hill, so you can walk up to the top, and there are houses. And I'm walking my dogs one night, and I'm seeing all of a sudden what looked like a comet the size of a small car. And again, it's going right over the rooftops, like right over it. And I'm frozen, standing there frozen, thinking this is a comet. It's heading to this neighborhood. It's going to explode. It's going to kill people. I know. I'm going to wait. I'm going to hear an explosion. I'm going to call 911. As soon as it got over the last rooftop, over the horizon where I couldn't see it, I never heard anything. It was nothing happened. And obviously now I know that was a ship.
Mm.
So the first couple of years, it was like that until I finally agreed. I said, okay. I got to know them better. But yeah, it was just really, and because I was so new at it, I really didn't understand exactly what I was experiencing.
In the picture itself, is it snowing?
So are you looking at the very last picture?
Yes, yeah, the one it looks like
Okay,
there's a lot
so
of blurry, and I'm gonna have it up here for people to see.
yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
the very last picture, so it looks like something moving. So you see the
Mm-hmm.
moon, which is small, and you see
Mm-hmm.
the tree.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you expand that picture, it's not just light. You'll see it has ridges. There's ridges there in it.
I do see that. You're right.
Yep. So that's also a common factor. So one of the things about the travelers, they're not in physical form. They've told me that they've transcended their physical form. They're very ancient, and their lifespans, they said, for us, they would appear immortal, but they're not. So even though they're in energy form, they still use technologies. So it's
Wow.
not like orbs and spirits and ghosts.
Mm.
And so these ridges, I have different photographs depending what you can see it. It's not uncommon.
And the other lights around it, are those other forms of them, or is this because I'm seeing the one large one with the ridges, but then I see
Right.
like streaks
You mean in
of,
that same
yeah,
photograph?
in that same photograph, just so that
Okay, let
the
me see what
audience,
you
yeah,
Oh yeah. So okay, so the tiny thing, that's the moon. So you know which one I'm
yeah,
talking about, the
yeah.
moon, right? Okay. So the other one, so they travel, I get a lot of cylinder shapes, and some of the cylinders will have, like the one above the moon to the left, has an orb in it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the travelers, one of the things they explained to me is where they're from, their dimension is so high frequency, like the vibration so high. And this world is too dense, too slow to vibration. They can't physically be here. So they create what they called consciousness containers. Those are their words, where they create this is my guess, I'm not a scientist, like a 3D holographic copy of their consciousness, which they send through. And they're connected to that. So then that's how they can come into this world and experience it through the replica of their consciousness. And then when they bring it back through, they take it back in, they reabsorb it, or however it works.
Wow.
So these cylinders
Mhm.
shape, it's very common. So for instance, there's another photograph. If you go back like two more pictures before that last picture,
Okay.
and you see that the whole space is filled with these beams and
Yes. Yeah.
okay. So all these photographs until recently, because the house of origin where I experienced them, and I still experience them, but the majority of the photographs, because I've moved recently, are from that. It's from on my property, like 99%.
Okay.
So this photograph that's filled with beams going in every direction, brown and white, and you can see some orbs in there too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I step outside my door and I don't see this. Um, all these things that I photograph, the majority, except what I call their ships, I take the photograph where I can see it if I'm doing a video, and then I can see it on the screen. But otherwise, I just take pictures with flashlight on my cell phone only, and I don't edit it, and that's what appears. So what you're seeing here is I could see my front yard, my driveway, my garage, my car. So when I get photographs like this, that the energies, they fill the whole everything in front of me, then what I believe is that I'm seeing into their dimension because my dimension disappears. And it feels like the photograph, you can't see anything of what's our realm of Earth here.
Hmm. Wow, yeah, I'm looking at it. It's just streaks of almost like light everywhere with little orbs floating in and out.
So
And
their
this,
energy. So yeah, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
that's okay. So yeah, so they are energy beings. They're in an
Yeah.
energy form, and this is how they appear to you. So when you're looking at it with the naked eye, you do not see that. But if you,
No, the
yeah,
few things that I see, for instance, they come in and out of our world or I don't know if our dimension. So I'll be looking, and where I live, it's rural. There's no street lights, so I
okay.
might have one light on my driveway, and I'll see like pops looking like flashlights, pops of light in the trees or in the night. And that's where I think they're popping in and out. So that's what I can see with my eyes, apart from what I saw the ships. And the other thing that I can see is where so some of the photographs you can see are these oval, different colored, look like ovals. Those are their light ships where they come in and travel when
Hmm.
the beams bring them down. And I do believe there's bigger ships up in the sky because I've seen what looks like stars,
Okay.
but they're actually moving and they'll be moving in a straight line across the sky. So I believe those are the bigger ships. They get into the smaller ships brought down by beams. I don't, even though I've been working with them since 2013, I really like information to come organically.
Hmm.
So I just take time and absorb. So what I was going to say is, I have the videos where I have of the ships, and the video is that it's one of the light ships. And when you watch it or share it, you'll see that slightly changes shapes, but it changes colors. And the one video that you have was taken from the second floor of my bedroom. So it's right in front of me. So the interesting thing is that how it appears to me physically is different than when it's documented on my phone, either by photo or video.
Mm.
So physically, when I'm looking at it, it's very small. So if you look at your fingernail, it's a quarter of the size of, well, at least my fingernail, like quarter of the size of my pinky fingernail.
Hmm.
That's their shit. And it has its iridescent colors, and it's almost like the shape of it, the structure is almost like you've seen those step pyramids. Like it has this kind of step kind of shape, and it's super tiny, but I can see it clearly. And so what looks like the beam of lights when they appear to me, and they've touched my hand. They've kind of touched my hand, like floating up and down, and they've been like very close to me, where they're just less than a foot away from my face. So their beams will look like a glass thread, like a spider web, like a thin thread, but it'll be exactly 45 degrees. And the interesting thing, I'm not very familiar. I know people use terms like 3D, 4D, 5D. I get the gist of it, but I try not to get caught up in words. Words are limiting.
Hmm.
But my experience, when they were around me at my other home, and that's when so far I've had the most intense experiences. I would so I would just have one light in my backyard that shined down. That's it. It wasn't like a park with like 10,000 lights. It was dark. If you looked up, it was dark. But somehow, if they were up at the height of the second floor, even though it was really tiny, I could always see it. I could sense it.
Mm.
So there's an aspect of, I guess, what people call the 5D, where you're really connected with everything, like seeing things you shouldn't see, something so tiny, or like the glass like thread that it was on, that was the beam that carried the ship, and seeing it like the second story of my house up in the sky.
Wow.
Because because the regular laws of gravity and physical and all that stuff just, they're real, but they're not real. They're
Right.
not. Yes, when
They're real
you're,
for us. They're real for us here, but they're not.
or either that, because there was a time of very intense connection. So when they came through, so they told me when they came through initially into this dimension, the point that they came through was through the moon. And so to come close, when they first started coming to me at some point within the first 6 months, they said, we're going to build a portal on your land. And we're going to bring the technologies, the energies of the healing, and work on me, align my energy, raise my energy so I could work with their energies, and also like plant it into the land. So the land got a wonderful vibration. There was like a huge hurricane that came down my block. I wasn't at home at the time, but one side of my property had all these young, dense, tall trees, and like a bunch of them should have come down on my house.
Hmm.
Like there was all this damage all around me. My house, I just lost some slats of my fence.
Wow.
So I've always been
Okay.
very protected,
Wow.
by them.
Hmm. So they've showed up in 2013. They've been communicating with you.
Hmm.
A couple directions I'd like to go with this, and
Sure.
I will be sharing the pictures. I appreciate you sharing those and the video. I'll share that as well. It would have been shared
Hmm.
already by now. Um, I want to just take a little bit of a left turn for a moment. We'll come right back.
Sure.
The because I have somebody like yourself on here, and I'd like to have this conversation because, I don't get this opportunity too often just yet. But the recent incidences of New Jersey drones,
Hmm.
the that really I took notice of that. Now, obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on in our world, politically, and all kinds of things that we can all have assumptions of and what could be going on, and some of it's probably legit. But what I noticed was when this was going on, I started. I have a good friend of mine that we were throwing things back and forth between. We went on TikTok because people were videoing these drones, because they were literally coming up to their homes and getting video. And some of them have been taken down, some of them are still up. I mean, who knows why?
Hmm.
But what I noticed is those started to disappear, and what started emerging were people seeing orbs in the sky. And the orbs were a lot of times around these drones. And then my thought at first was the drones were after the orbs, but then it was more like, are we just noticing the orbs because we're looking to the skies? Because how many of us aren't looking to the skies? And then what
Hmm.
I started noticing were people communicating with the orbs. They were zooming in to these orbs in the sky, and the orbs were communicating. You'd hear people talking and saying, "Oh, you can hear me," and it would flash. And can you turn the color purple? And it would go purple. And I started seeing all of these, and I'm telling people that I know, "Oh, have you seen what's going on?" And they're like, "Nope. What are you talking about?" Like I'm like, they're all over. What are you talking about? Like it's showing up on all my TikTok because the algorithm is showing me these things because that's what I
Hmm.
found. And this was going on and on. And I was like, wow, there's a lot going on. And I just started seeing all this is in this year, right? This has just been happening so much. And now it's kind of calmed down again, but maybe it's because my algorithm's all out of whack again. Here's my question. I wanted to bring that up because I wanted to bring it to your attention. Are those separate entities then than what you're dealing with? Are they similar? Is this like, do you have any insight on what that could be, or is this the first you've heard about it as well?
No, and actually, no, I've been reading about it and seeing it because I'm interested in just hearing other people's experiences. So, two things. One is from my deck, I had the experience of seeing two red orbs that were initially just in the sky. They were just not very together like this, but they moved together and then they started to move in different ways. So I feel like I had the experience of seeing that during that time period here. I don't feel like they were the travelers. They weren't, yeah, no,
Okay.
and I've just heard from them, it wasn't them. It's a vast universe out there. There's
Hmm.
many, many, many beings. Sometimes I have clients saying they feel like they connected to they feel like they connected to an ET energy.
Mhm.
So what do? They run to Google to see is it the Greys? Is it the Pleiadians? And I kind of laugh. I'm like, well, what if your ET isn't in Google? Do you know what I mean? You have, you know.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's a really wide universe. So it's just like the number of people on Earth. There's more than 8 billion. I'm sure there's more than that.
Hmm.
So I think we have to like take it one at a time and just not generalize,
Okay.
because then people are just like just saying grace, this, that, and then they limit themselves. But
Hmm.
you definitely need to know, like, is this a good being or not? Because again, whatever shape or form, these are real, and I'm sure they come in all sorts of, shapes and sizes and the spectrum, good, bad, manipulative, caring. So
Yeah.
do diligence and don't just go, wow, you impress me. Let me hand myself over to you.
Oh, I see what you mean. I see what you
Yeah.
mean. The
Yeah.
I guess the biggest thing I was trying to get to is that I've noticed
Hmm.
now more than ever that energies are feeling heightened. There's a lot of energy around the world for all different reasons. The human
Yeah.
energy is heightened. There's a lot of things coming out. There was just something released about even pyramids that I was really fascinated by.
Mhm.
There's all kinds of things that are happening. It seems like it's almost like everything's speeding up and we're getting a lot of
Yeah.
information really quick. And I guess my question would be, if you've been communicating since 2013 with the travelers, have
Hmm.
you had the feeling or indication that you kind of touched on it, but I wonder if we can touch on it a little bit more, that there's something happening where we're becoming more like we're going to find out more about them, find out more about, because I feel like we've been kind of in the dark and the
Hmm.
world's been in the dark. There was funny moments when they'd bring out green aliens on back in the 60s or whenever it was, and 30,
Hmm.
50s, whenever the Roswell stuff happened, all this crazy stuff, right? Do you ever get that feeling like this is kind of increasing or intensifying in any way? Or messages from them that say that, I should say.
Sure. Well, definitely what they told me is they've come much, much earlier, but they were waiting for us to get to the point where they would present themselves and we would be open to a degree, or we would be evolved enough to understand where they might be from, because we're starting to reach out into space.
Mm,
But when I work with people, I also tell them there's no accident. If you see something in the sky and your experience was 2 seconds, that wasn't an accident. They're presenting themselves to you, whoever they are.
mm,
And so they might present themselves to you over and over again, maybe not any closer than that or not any more than that. They're getting us ready. There's a lot of communities. The travelers have told us that humans, can go in a lot of directions. And one of the things they don't want is for us not to be evolved enough and just bring all our crap out there, hatred, racism, nuclear weapons. And so the travelers believe in us. So what they told me about their own history, when they were in physical form, they were a warring, a warring people. They almost committed genocide of their own entire species on their planet. And they survived it and they evolved to the point where they're visiting different worlds and helping the beings there. And they believe we can do the same. Actually, sometimes they believe in us more in us than I do.
wow.
So they're here to help us do that, reach that tipping point, because they've said to me, we're being watched by the beings in the universe.
Hmm.
And they're just they're looking at us, do we want them in our neighborhood kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
you're also not the first person to say that. That message I've heard quite a few times,
yeah.
that we're kind of they kind of got their popcorn right now and they're watching our moves very precisely right now in the next little bit, because we've evolved to a point. I mean, just the other day I seen even
Yeah.
an AI robot that was instructed to do one thing and it did something completely different. And I
Hmm.
went, okay, interesting. So we've got a lot happening all at once. coming
Hmm.
to a moment, and it can be exciting as well,
Yes.
but it can also be scary. And so, I my feeling has always been, and I haven't been in communication with ET as far as I know, unless I'm getting downloads and I'm thinking these things. And my feeling is that I've always thought, and if you have a different feeling, I'd love to hear your. I'm not going to be offended if it's completely different.
Sure.
Is that we are at a tipping point where we have a lot kind of at stake, and we are growing and we're evolving, and we have the ability of either growing and becoming something amazing, or we could have the ability of potentially taking ourselves out. But that being said, I've always felt like we have too much than what we have too much technology, or too then we're, like we haven't evolved enough to be having things like nuclear, to be having these things from a spiritual standpoint. And that it's almost like, so I have a 2-year-old, I have a 2.5-year-old, and
Hmm.
I always use this analogy. If I saw my 2.5-year-old run out and start climbing on something, and I thought she could take a little tumble and hit her head or something, if I don't think she's really going to hurt herself, I might give her that opportunity to learn a lesson. But
Hmm.
if she runs out in the living room and she's got a knife in her hands, I'm going to take that knife from her hands. And my analogy is, and my thought is,
Yeah.
that if we're being watched and we're being monitored, kind of thing, and um, there's probably a point where they can't step in, but then there may be a point where they have to if we get carried away, because
But
I have this
depends who they are. It's not monolithic. That's the thing.
and what do you mean by that?
Like, who's they? There's a lot of different extraterrestrial beings. So apart from the travelers,
Hmm.
my one other experience, and it wasn't prolonged. So there's a type of ETs that look like that are closer to looking like praying mantises.
Hmm.
And I had an experience with them, and it was really interesting. They said they've come to Earth through a wormhole, that type of thing, and they were looking for to collect from, I don't know, I guess in a form like, and it felt more like not material, but more like molecules of certain kinds of um, molecules, certain kind. I don't know if to say gases or minerals or whatever that they needed for themselves.
Hmm.
And so the interesting thing with them, I remember going through a period of heartache, losing like a very, very close friend, suddenly not being close anymore. And it literally tore my heart. And it took me months to heal.
Mm.
And so they said, and at that point, I was in a lot of pain. They said to me, because they're very scientific, so they're very different than the travelers. The travelers, their energy is very soft, very kind.
Hmm.
They even can be funny. And these beings were very like scientific and very just, like just you couldn't imagine them make cracking jokes. And so they worked a lot with technology. So they said, we can implant something in you and it'll make you feel better. And I normally wouldn't say that. And also I'm like, I didn't see them, I heard them. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll try. But even then I felt like a little foolish. And so I went to sleep. They said, go to sleep the next morning. I went to sleep, I woke up, and the my heartache was gone. I felt just normal but good. Just
Mm.
good. And then the travelers, I was like that all day. And the travelers said, no, you have to give it back. That's cheating. Like, they really believe in dealing with things and developing. So that night I said, okay, I have to give it back to you. And they said, okay, you'll wake up and it'll be gone. And when I woke up, I could feel that pain again, the pain
Wow.
of the heartbreak.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, so there's different, and those are my two main experiences. So there's
Mhm.
all kinds of different ETs with all kinds of different missions
Mhm.
and, way of being, and maybe what is their purpose, what they believe you need, what they believe they want. So
Yeah.
that's what I mean by not like, what's they?
Right. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
guess I guess where I'm kind of going a little bit with it is we're here sitting here in
yeah,
the 3D, right? We got our
right.
we got our skin suits on. And I talked to enough people, like I said, that have out of body experiences and spiritual experiences that
Yeah.
they've come to believe that they almost find it humorous sometimes that we think this is it because they've had
Yeah.
this experience that
Mhm.
has proven to them, at least in their life experience, that that's not it. And I
Right.
guess where I'm getting at is when we're
Hmm.
dealing with some of the things we deal with to hurt ourselves, that some of those things are working within different fields of existence. You could look at nuclear, for instance, right? And what I wonder, I've always wondered this, if
Yeah.
these technologies or these things that we're playing with as children, as little infant babies, if it could harm the other dimensional areas, meaning, yes, there might be a million of them out there, 1,000 of them out there, but if we're using things that could harm them, I would, I would not know, I would look at it from a standpoint of if I were the person in charge of that and watching this,
Hmm.
and I knew it was going to harm my species or I would step in. That's just
Yeah.
because I would know that they're playing with fire and they don't know how fire works yet. And so
Right.
that's my feeling, and it's like a deep feeling I have, and it's not coming from hope because again, uh, I hope that we evolve and become amazing species and turn into what
Hmm.
we're going to turn to. Um, but I also know we're silly little goofballs down here, and I know that
Hmm.
we might make mistakes. So, but I do still feel that there's probably a limit to that. And the reason is also when you look back in any of our history where we were playing with nuclear and things, you would see these videos of these UFOs everywhere just showing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's tons of footage of that. That's not even that's you can find that. And to me, it's almost like, whoa, what are these guys doing? What are we playing
Hmm.
with here? And I think that's where I was going with it. Is you're right.
Yeah.
You're likely right that there's probably so many of them that maybe they're like, hey, don't interfere, let them do
Well,
this. But
so
yeah,
the travelers are here to support us and help us to get to the tipping point. So I'm going to say two things. One is when I do healing with them, what they're here to do is apart from aligning our energy bodies and helping to shift whatever they can physically, mentally, emotionally, they're also here to wake up dormant abilities we have in our DNA. And those are related to, all the clairvoyant, the psychic, so that we can connect, we can heal. They said that eventually we're also going to transcend our physical bodies, and they call themselves master manipulators of energy, and that we have that ability, but we have to grow into it where we can shift anything, like you said. And by the way, when you said the skin suits, they call this because they've come here and they've incarnated as humans to understand it. And actually, truth be told, they said that I'm one of them, that I have been incarnating as a human for so long that I've forgotten my roots. And I believe all this 3D stuff, and
Mm,
that this is physical and that it can't be changed so easily. But they've showed me like you can lose an arm and you can recreate it. So right now, what I'm working on is reconnecting to that part of myself.
wow.
But so they're going to support us in that way, but they've told me that there are, I don't know who they are exactly, I haven't asked, but they said and they're watching us, so it's a collective, and they're
Wow.
watching, judging, and there is a time limit.
Mm.
And yeah, they're watching, make sure that we don't bring it up out there, they're going to step in.
Okay, so that's kind of where that's what I was
Yeah,
trying to get at. Yeah.
that they would step in. But
Mhm.
so the interesting thing is, first of all, the whole idea of time, past, present, future, they've I work a lot with timelines with them. They teach me about those kinds of things. And obviously they've shown me there's really no time. One of the diagrams that I've drawn based on what they've told me is a circle, and how it intersects in the past can be in front of the present, so that we're heading to the past, but we're not really heading to the past, just that different events can come together, and we shouldn't worry whether it's from the past or from the future.
Mm.
It's all together. And plus we have parallel earths, so maybe in this Earth timeline, this specific Earth, something's going to happen. But there's other versions of ourselves on other Earths that I've been told we're all interconnected. My version of me affects other versions of me on other Earths, and likewise, they've shown it to me as being a ring of
Mm,
Brenda's, a ring of John's. And so, John, here, what you do to bring yourself up, that will carry to the other Johns, or what you do to bring yourself down, that will carry. So, yeah, so it's interconnected, but it's also many different versions of us is happening, not just parallel, but past, present, future. So maybe it's just
wow.
all about experimenting.
Mhm.
We're just in a way experimenting, maybe having fun or maybe suffering in all kinds of forms, just to learn about life, learn about everything.
Wow. All this has been going on. Again, it's like you
Hmm.
said, it was interesting how when we opened the conversation here, you said when COVID hit, you kind of didn't feel alone because you were dealing with this. So many people felt isolated during those times.
Hmm.
And yeah, you had all this going on. And that's a pretty special thing, to be able to communicate that way. And
Yeah.
you still work with people as well, like with their
So
spirit? Like, do you still do that kind of work?
no, absolutely. So one of the things that I don't just believe I know is when I work with somebody, I want to empower them.
Hmm.
And I want to share this and I want to help them. And actually, it's not hard at all. Like, for instance, when I teach people how to communicate with animals, I always say, I'm just a person that stands up here and tells you you can do it because you already have that ability. It's just a muscle that's atrophied that we have to revive and work with. And
Hmm.
it's also our mind saying, I don't know, can I do it? Is this thing real? So you have it already. I'm not giving you anything. I'm just telling you you can do it. You're believing me. And so you just go with it. And once
Right.
people start, it's so natural. So then that's an entryway. That's very easy entryway because pets, the spirit of pets are very pure, like angels.
Hmm.
So unless they're mad at you, they're going to help you. So when you communicate with an animal, one person is an expert at telepathic communication, the animal, they're going to help you. So that's an easy way to get in. So I always tell people if you don't want to do a workshop, but you want to try it on your own, pets, angels, trees, flowers, those are, or ancestors that have passed on, like grandma that loved you to pieces, those are spiritual beings that you can just practice with, not even take any workshops and just say, and you're safe. And if you just try and you're sincere and open, you will hear back. But it's mostly people just feeling unsure, or feeling weird, or being told this doesn't exist. And that's my only role as a teacher to say, it does. You're doing great. Keep going. And that's it.
How do people communicate with you? Do you have a website or anything? Is there a way, do you have anything? I know this is the
I do,
first time you've
yes.
done this, but
Yeah. So right now I have a new website. It's my name, BrendaSeldin.com. And actually, I sent you a link, and I'm sorry, last minute, but it said /form. The travelers is so the problem is like working with the travelers since 2013. There's messages, there's healings, there's explaining everything in the photographs. There's my experiences with them that I'm trying to figure out a way how to present them in a way where there's so much.
yeah.
It's been my life since then. So it's not I saw this and I think it was that and it's a paragraph or every now
Right.
and then.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start putting that part out, and I'm going to start, I want to start putting out YouTube videos and really share them with people so they can learn. And one of the things that I believe in is full transparency. So it's not going to be like, what is this picture, and leave people hanging. It's really like, I want to share everything to benefit and to help people connect with them.
Hmm.
So I also will be starting up again monthly free healings.
Oh,
So
wow.
people can just join in on Zoom.
And are they going to find that information on your website or where would the people find it?
Yes, on my
Okay.
website. And there's a link there that I sent you in that email, BrendaSeldin.com /form.
Hmm.
If they want to send me their email, I'm going to start up a newsletter about the traveler specifically in the very near future.
Yeah, because you kind of you channel their messages at times, right? And that's probably
I
something
do.
that you could be updating
Hmm.
the information you're getting. Do they have a few last quick questions here? Do they have
Yeah,
high hopes for us?
they do. Like I said, they believe in us more than I do sometimes.
Hmm.
So because their history, they were really a warring people, almost like Sparta.
Wow.
It's like very warrior-like clans, kingdoms, and they almost decimated themselves. So
Wow.
they've always said to me, if we can do it, you can do it. They're like our cheerleaders.
And they've ascended to a point of, I mean, quite literally, they understand energy a lot better than us because they're in a different form. And I guess I bring that up because I look at the things going around in the world and the way that
Yeah.
the energy, I've just seen people bouncing off other people's energy lately. There's a lot of division going around the world. Doesn't matter what
Hmm.
country you're talking about. And I'm going, we are at a heightened state right now, but there's got to be a reason for it. I think it's a necessary uh, piece of who we are so that we can get to the next level, right? It's almost like a growing pain, is the way I'm looking at it right now. That's my hope, I guess. I've always been kind of
Yeah.
an optimist, and I guess that's how I see it. But it's not fun while you're going through it. And so maybe that's what they see, and maybe
And
that's what they've gone through
right. And it's our
themselves.
souls. It's our, I always like to say when the day that it's my time to pass on again, I'm going to look back on it as a soul. This was my role. This was what I wore and who I said I was. And I'll be like, oh, remember when?
Right.
You thought you were going to be decimated in nuclear war. Yeah.
Right. I love the way you
And
say
then
it, just
next
so
lifetime,
nonchalant.
I'm going to be Gandhi like, and
Right.
everybody's going to be I think it's the soul, the great soul, like where you want to call it God, great spirit, consciousness, experiencing itself drop by drop within each of us.
Mm.
I don't know. I'll find
Uh,
out once
I love
I
that.
go back to
Well,
that space.
it kind of mirrors into the last question I always ask
Yeah.
everybody, and you've kind of answered it, but maybe if we can kind of sum it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's just because based on your life experience, and you've had a very different life experience, and you look like you're continuing to do that. And I love the things you're doing. The question I always ask is when you're here, we're here in this physical right now. So
Hmm.
you're talking to me, I'm talking to you, we're in this moment. And you know, usually I ask my near-death experiencers this because they've gone to the other side and seen different things than we've seen, and some of them miss it, and some of them are feel
Yeah.
blessed to be here though at the same time. It's a weird
Yeah. Yeah.
connection there. Why are we here? What is our main purpose to incarnating as a human being in this flesh? Do you have any insight around that as to why we're even doing this?
Um, Definitely I've come to believe that the earth is that we learn through physicality and through suffering and through joy. And one of the things that travelers have said to me is because they're so long lived, I don't know, I'm guessing, but let's just say they live millions of years, then they said their lives are so long, there's no impetus for sudden change. So at this point, whatever way they evolve is very, very slowly
Hmm.
because we have the impetus of death, or suffering. And so, not that we should run toward death or run toward suffering, but we should ask ourselves, why did I experience this? What can I learn from it? There's
Hmm.
nothing that has to go wasted because then at least you've suffered, but you can say, oh, I've received this gift of understanding so I can evolve or so I can heal or so I can help others. And so I think actually, in truth, that the only really for me the perfection of peace and beauty is in nature, and not that nature is perfect, but the way nature is perfect is that animals in nature are just themselves.
Hmm.
Human beings are the only ones that think wherever I am isn't good enough and I should try to be something else.
Right.
And that's why nature and animals are perfect. So if we can be more accepting of ourselves and others, I always think, why is it that I accept my dog, who sometimes I call him the jerk, because every time I want him to do something, he just rolls on his back, gives me his belly, and smiles like, get off the couch or move over or
Right.
different things. He pulls me and he's a pit bull and I think he's coming with me and he jerks me. And all of a sudden, I'm almost off my feet. It's because for some reason I accept animals exactly the way they are. So I try to do that with people. So it's
Mhm.
not perfection. It's just, just being open as you are to yourself and for others.
Mm.
So I think that's what the earth is about. It's a kind of hard learning. It's boot camp learning. But there's
Mm.
also a joy in it because if you can transcend that while you're here, which doesn't mean you become godlike or everything's always perfect. I always say I don't need everything to be perfect. I just need to understand how to go with the flow no matter what is. And then I can be good, you know?
I love that, and it's interesting to hear your mindset around it. I mean, because I have people with NDEs that tell me this, and you're saying many of the similar things of it being it's hard. It can be it can have suffering. It can have but it's such a learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll have people say the people who are on the positive side of it is to say, listen, like you're here right now, and it's a blessing to be here. Like you're doing something that's really amazing as a spirit, and because you're going through the mud to get there. It's almost like sometimes I wonder if we come here to evolve quicker. It's like a faster way to move. And not to
Mm-hmm.
say that they're not evolved, but
Yeah.
there's something to it because we're putting ourselves through this instead of just kind of existing, if you will, right? So that's where kind of I relate to what you said, especially with the fact that it's got joy, it's got suffering, and it's a physical experience. So, but that was amazing. I love the conversation. I want to thank you so much for
Thank
coming on and
you. I
sharing.
really enjoyed myself. Thank you so much.
I would encourage anyone that's listening to this, if you found the information that Brenda's presented interesting, to please check out her website. I will have links to anything that you share, so I'll have those
Thank
shared.
you.
I turn to the audience and I say, please continue to like, share, and subscribe to the Soul Inspired. This is why we do what we do, so we can spread messages. If you have someone that thinks this would be interesting, and this is an interesting one, I would encourage you to share it. And we will see you next time on the Soul Inspired. So thank you so much, Brenda. Thank you again.
Thank you.
So